This video, Aftercare, will show you how to deal with the various paperwork you get through each year from your French property under the Residence de Tourisme scheme in France. This first document shows a list of expenses sent by your accountant once per year, where you can offset these various expenses against your rental income. So it's important to gather the appropriate documents and send them to your accountant once per year so that he can offset these expenses and roll them forward each year. This first document, a typical invoice for your taxe foncière, is normally exempt for the first 2 years for any new development. The developer normally issues you, the purchaser, with a H2 form, which you complete and return back to the French authorities. This then exempts you from the taxe foncière for the first 2 years. From year 3 on, you must pay this, otherwise there will be a 10% penalty for each term thereafter. This is another example of the taxe foncière on the reverse side, and for this document we can see that the sum to pay is €307, to be paid by the 15th of October 2008. This document is an example of a delayed taxe foncière whereby the 10% penalty has been applied, and the amount to pay in this case is €338 for the taxe foncière for this year. This is another example of how a taxe foncière document appears, and it confirms the date by which it must be paid, otherwise the penalty of 10% will be applied. This again is another example of the taxe foncière document, which you can see the amount that must be paid to the French revenue once per year. Again, this is from year 3 on, subject to the developer issuing the H2 form initially. This is an example of a taxe d'habitation, which is normally exempt from French leaseback purchasers. However, in the event that you do get this, the amount is confirmed as €51 in this case. This document is an example of a TV license, which is the Residence audiovisuelle, and this must be paid once per year. Again, this is normally exempt from French leaseback property investors. This document is an example of the syndic fees, which are the co-property charges, which must be paid by the French leaseback purchaser once per annum. This document relates to the VAT reimbursement to the French authorities that must be paid by you once per annum, where the management company pay you the VAT inclusive rental income, where the VAT on rental income is 5.5% versus the VAT on the purchase price of 19.6%. Taking an example, where the management company pay you 5% on the purchase price for a typical apartment, say that costs €100,000. So the rental income at 5% is €5,000 per annum. However, the management company pay the owner €5,275 per annum, where the €275 is the excess 5.5% VAT that must be reimbursed to the French revenue. So the rental income is still 5%, however it's perceived that you're getting a greater return than 5%. This document is an example of a second page from the French revenue, which shows the expenses that you can deduct from the VAT that must be reimbursed to the French revenue. And this third page shows an example of the final VAT bill that you must pay, less the deductions allowed to the French revenue for the excess 5.5% in rental income that you're receiving on the original rental income amount. This document is an example of the request for funds from your accountant to continue with doing your tax returns in France, where normally you'd pay up front for 3 years when you're signing for your property, and then thereafter you pay per annum from year 4 on. This document is an example of the French tax returns from the French revenue. And on one of the pages from the French revenue, they show the various expenses that you can offset against your rental income, where the table on the left shows the expenses that you can offset against your rental income on the right, so that you can have an accrued loss that you can roll forward each year. And that concludes Aftercare under French Leaseback for the Residence de Tourisme scheme by rtfrance.com.